Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the City Confessions. Today's guest is Hannah Masi. She is an actress and model from Los Angeles, but currently living in New York. She has been modeling since she was 8 years old and has transitioned her career to TV and film. And she is currently expecting her first baby. So, congratulations. And Hannah and I met at a coterie dinner and we just bonded. She sat at my table and the conversation was flowing. So I really wanted her to come on my podcast to talk about her story. So, hi, Hannah. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I feel like we're at dinner all over again.
I know, I love it. So, why don't you introduce yourself to my listeners? Tell us who you are and your story with New York, because you are a newer resident. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want to tell me about your background.
I mean the introduction you did kind of summed it up perfectly, but my name's Hannah. I'm an actress and model. I'm from Los Angeles. I moved to New York March of 2020, which is just epic timing for
Yes.
someone to move here. Um, and it's very interesting because since I've moved to New York, my life has gotten the most beautiful it's ever been. I got engaged since moving here. I've gotten married. I got pregnant. Great career things have happened since moving here. But the city itself is just not for me. Like, so it's an interesting juxtaposition to be in, to have like so many wonderful things be happening in this city while I still just don't mesh completely with
Hmm.
it. Um, I am so homesick for Los Angeles. And then I have like all my friends and people I've grown up with in LA being like, LA sucks. Like, what are you talking about? So maybe you can't win. But I miss it. I find New York it's a tough city. And I loved speaking with you about it at the dinner because as someone who you're born and raised in New
Hmm.
York, it's like in your blood. And
Hmm.
it's just interesting to hear like two different women's perspective of really flourishing here. Because like your career and your baby and all of your wonderful things as well happened in New York. So you'd
Hmm.
think the city for me would be like the end all be all. Um, but I miss nature. I do better with a bit of a slower pace. I like a little less toughness than New York has.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of been a little bit of the New York journey. And my husband and I, who was my boyfriend at the time, we were long distance between New York and LA. And so, really meeting him and falling in love with him is what brought me out into New York. Before that, I swore it off completely. I had been out here as like an 18-year-old modeling for a little bit. And I was like, I'm never going back to New York. I could never live in New York. It's dark, it's scary.
Hmm.
I didn't make friends here prior to that. So it's definitely a better experience and a different experience now. But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens in the next couple of years as we now have a family and are starting to think about other places.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I think your feelings are completely valid. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of pride being a New Yorker, but at the same time, I understand that it's not for everybody. And it is a city that is very cutthroat, it's very stressful. And even in 2020, when everything started happening with the pandemic, that's when I personally questioned kind of my relationship with New York and my love for New York because I
Yeah.
then realized that maybe not that it wasn't for me, but like, is there someplace else that would better suit me and kind of my values at the time? But with that being said, I feel like not that you're asking for advice, but because you like nature and you like a slower pace, like what I started to do when the city was getting too stressful was to like do getaways, like to the
Yeah.
Catskills. Have you been there?
During COVID, we were a lot better. It's so annoying to still reference COVID, but it was
Yeah.
like such a major point in all of our
Yes.
lives. We did a much better job in that, year and a half
Mm-hmm.
time frame than we do now, just because life is so much busier now.
Mm-hmm.
But we were going up like hiking in Bear Mountain and
Yeah.
exploring there a little bit more. And you're so right. It really does kind of help take the edge off. And honestly, I even find going to Central Park is
Mm-hmm.
helpful. We live downtown, so it kind of feels like a journey
Yeah,
up
for
there.
sure.
Um, but like spending a day walking around, like packing a little picnic, like hanging out up there, it does kind of reset you in a nice way. I think nature is so important, whatever it means, like whether it's ocean, grass, bird, like how whatever you can do to be around like real elements and a little less concrete, I just
Mm-hmm.
think for everyone.
No, I agree. And how does your husband feel about New York? Is he kind of like a ride or die?
He I still don't know. Like
Okay.
he's from Montreal, so
Mm-hmm.
he's East Coast, through
Mm-hmm.
and through. But when we started dating, he was like joking to his friends. He was like, "Oh my God, like I met this girl from LA. It's finally my excuse to move out to California." And
Oh.
so that kind of has always been there within our
Mm-hmm.
relationship of him being ready to be somewhere new. Um, so I don't know, but then he says things like, God, I would miss New York so much. Like we're big comedy people, so we'll go to Comedy Cell a lot. And like then you walk and you grab dinner and then you run into
Yeah.
friends. Like that is the most amazing thing. And that only happens here. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is so authentically a New York thing. In LA you have to plan an hour and 10 minutes everywhere you go. So
Yeah.
it's
And
just
then
different.
yeah, I want to segue kind of to your career because from an outsider's point of view, I feel like LA is definitely the place for acting and New York is more like fashion. At least that's kind of what's perceived and what's projected like on TV. So, how has your career changed since like being in New York? Because you were saying that you actually are having a lot of opportunities. So, I'm curious to know the
Yeah.
difference.
So 100% LA would have been the place to be for TV and film
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, even before COVID and having things kind of transition to be more virtual, there was a lot of self tapes going on for
Mm.
actors living all over the place. And so even when I was in LA, I would say probably 60% of my auditions would be self tapes and 40% in the room. And obviously COVID had a huge impact on the way that that was done. And so now it's like 99.999% meetings are virtual because
Oh, wow.
casting doesn't have to rent out studios the same
Mm.
way. Um, and everyone just kind of learned that this might be an easier way to do the thing. And when I originally moved out to New York, I had actually booked my first series regular like that same month that I was supposed to be moving in with David here, and it was shooting in New York. And it was just a good, of course, COVID ruined it, and it was a more process, and tears were shed. Um, but I think you can really be anywhere now. And I actually had this conversation with my manager a few days ago, being like, do I need to be back there? Like, tell me, because I'm pregnant. And so everything's a
Hmm.
little wonky right now with auditioning and opportunities. So me being how I am, who's like itching to work 24/7, has really had to take a step back a
Hmm.
little bit and accept some slowness, which probably is good. But she was just saying, yeah, it does not matter. Like if you need to be here, you get on a plane if there's a meeting here. Other than that, like everything's virtual. Which is really nice that you can have your life and also pursue what you want to do.
Hmm. Talk to me about like the pregnancy and do you have to disclose that when you're auditioning? Like, how does that work?
I'm so lucky in my personal situation with
Okay.
my team, my like agents and manager. But I still had so much anxiety about
Hmm.
telling them I was pregnant because even though like we've come a long way in this world of ours with women becoming
Hmm.
mothers, still pursuing their careers and having success, but it's still like a very daunting thing to be seen as one kind of way in the eyes of casting and your agents and producers and all of the people that you're so desperately trying to get to like you as an actor.
Hmm.
And then you throw in, by the way, I'm pregnant. So now there's this other thing that naturally is number one now. Like there's no getting around this tiny human being we made
Hmm.
kind of dictating what we're doing for the rest of our lives. So I waited until like 14 weeks to tell my, it was like really when I started showing, I
Hmm.
decided to disclose it. And they couldn't have been more supportive and lovely and great about it. And then I had my first like issue with it come up where I read for a role and it got to the point of checking for availability, and they needed my availability to be between January and July, which is my entire pregnancy. Um, and then, they find out I'm pregnant and it was so sorry, not going to work out. And then that's when I kind of had to realize, like, oh, wow, okay. So in my head, pregnancy wasn't affecting anything. I was like, they'll shoot around it, like angles, whatever. So it was kind of a reality check of like, you can truly have it all, but not all at the same time. And
Mm.
so that's been really a lesson for me to learn that like it's okay to slow down and maybe take a little pause and break here. Um, and I hope, my intention is to go back to it once this little human being makes their way here. But I'm not really sure exactly what it looks like yet and how I'll navigate that. But with all things in life, it just kind of falls into place, I guess.
I love your perspective and kind of like the phrase that you can have everything, just not all at
You
once.
can have it all. Like I
Yeah, you can
really
have it
do
all, but
believe
not.
that. Yeah, like I really do think women can have it. Like we can have the family, we can have the career, we can have the friends, we can really do all of it. I just think the issue comes when we're trying to do it all at once.
Mhm.
Because what human can balance all of that?
Where
Um,
do you think that a mindset comes from? Like, were you raised in a family where you guys were all really supportive, or did you kind of cultivate that perspective yourself through maybe like life challenges? Because it's a
my
beautiful, beautiful mindset to have.
my parents are awesome. They've always been kind of hands off in a nice way with me. I'm the youngest of four. And so by the time it was, my turn for all of these life decisions and figuring out my way, they kind of were just like, you got it, you'll figure it out. And I did. And so I think a lot of the perspective was gained through kind of being thrown into the ocean a little bit to
Mm.
figure it out, and always having home to go back to and having parents to support me when if I changed my mind. But they were like, if you're going to do this thing, jump into it both feet and trial and error. Like I am weirdly so grateful for how much rejection I've had, because you have way more rejection than success with what I chose to do with my life. And I think through that, you kind of gain a little bit of peace knowing like, okay, for every 30 things that don't work out, the one that does is just around the corner. And so you learn that all the time over and over again, that it kind of just, it brings you peace with it. Um, for the most part. And then you'll have days where you spiral and you're like, holy shit, what am I doing?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I feel like that mindset too is prepping you to be like a mom. I mean, everybody's journey through pregnancy and motherhood is different, but to kind of already have that like grace for yourself is going to be so beneficial. I
Hope so.
think,
I'll be
yeah.
calling you for pointers, like freaking out, being like,
No,
is this
you're fine. Yes. So if you recall and take a moment to reflect on your life thus far, whether it's personal or professional, what has been the biggest challenge? Is it the move to New York, or has it been a casting call, or can you just recall a moment where maybe it was considered rock bottom?
um I feel like I've had a few moments like that in my life. I think my early 20s, really right before I met my husband, because I met him when I was 22. Um I Speaking of a time in life when like not many successes are coming your way and you're auditioning and you're grinding it out and you're trying to make rent and also trying to like figure out who you are as a young person. I remember I had the worst day I think I've ever had with getting a really shitty call. I rear-ended someone in LA. I had never been in a car accident before. I called my dad, like crying, bawling, like, what do I do about insurance? What do I do with the car? What do I do? Like, and then I was like, oh, this is it. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm spiraling. Should I have gone to college? Should I have
Hmm.
pursued something that had an actual path with it? Should I, like, what the hell is happening? Um and again, my parents kind of did the thing that for my personality works best of you're okay, like all the things that matter in life, you're fine, you're healthy, you have people who love you. You need to figure this out. Like if you're going to continue pursuing this and you're going to pursue it and you're going to
Mhm.
have to figure out how to make ends meet in the meantime, or you go a different route. And every single time I just continued choosing the chaotic route to go. But then as life works, David and I met, I think like 2 weeks after that. And I booked the series regular role about a month after that. And so it was just adding on to that mindset of like, not everything good is forever and not everything bad is forever. Like it's ever changing. And so career wise, I think that was probably the worst time for me. And then life wise, um, 2 years ago, which is crazy, 2 years ago in August, my big sister, who is like my best friend, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that like really flipped my whole family's life upside down to get told that like she at such a young age had such an aggressive
Mhm.
cancer. And so I went through that full spiral of like, oh my God, I can't have any chemicals. I can't breathe any air. I'm so scared. It's gonna happen to me. I'm like, is my sister gonna be okay? My sister had like 2 surgeries back to back and went through chemo and radiation. And like that was truly the worst thing I've experienced in my life so far is her getting sick. And the thought creeping into my head of like, what would I do if like my sister wasn't here anymore?
Mhm.
And like how easily a good day the next can turn into, her calling me saying, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I have breast cancer. And it just kind of shed a very bright light on how important it is to focus on the things that are good and beautiful in your life, and the
Mhm.
things that are bad, they'll come and go. And now on the other side of it, she's healthy, she's great. She like turned it into an amazing ceramics business for herself. And so like seeing her thrive also is such a reminder that like, okay, this pretty much the worst call you can get
Mhm.
turned into a pretty silver lining, I think, in her life. And I imagine throughout life there's going to be a million more times that I'm going to be like, oh no, 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 this is the worst thing ever. I thought it was bad 2 years ago. This is really, really bad.
Mhm.
But somehow like you survive it. You handle it when it presents
Mhm.
itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know it's like not easy to be open about that, especially because it's with your family. I have two sisters and I'm really close to them. So like I can not like relate in that aspect, but of course the special bond is definitely just irreplaceable and almost like indescribable. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. But going off of what you said too, I also believe like I look at life kind of like in a bigger picture, right? Like almost as a book. And
Yeah.
so like the chapter that you have right now, like when you read a good book, you kind of fall in love with the character, which is yourself, right? You're the main character. But you also want to see the character grow. And like sometimes it's boring if they're not going through struggles. And if they're all happy, it's like, okay, like what more can you offer to the
Yeah.
world, right? Because the
Yeah.
world is so big. And I sometimes feel like when you take on a third party perspective or like an outsider's view, it makes you almost appreciate life more or kind of just not be so attached to, like the feelings and everything that's happening around you. I don't know, that happens to me. So I love that
So
you
that's,
are.
I love that. I'm gonna use that little nugget in my life because it really is true. I was just saying to someone the other day that like he was talking to me about like
Mhm,
mom advice who's newly pregnant. And I'm like, listen, I'm not quite there yet, but what I can tell you is your life is not supposed to stay the same forever.
mhm.
Exactly to what you're saying. That is so boring if you're never
Yeah.
given challenges and then overcome it. And then you get that self-confidence in yourself of like, okay, we made it through that one.
Mhm.
Look at like the battle wounds of it. And now next time something like this happens, I know what I'm doing. you
And
know?
and how wonderful is it, like, 10, 20 years from now, like for you to talk to your baby or your child. Obviously, not gonna be, well, they're always gonna be your baby, but to say, like, mom did this, like I was in LA and I pursued acting, and then, whatever happened in New York. And it's just like
Yeah.
such a beautiful, like, life story. So I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
a
just,
full life. You can't It's like the cheesiest, most annoying thing to say ever, but you really like don't appreciate all the beautiful moments if those hard ones aren't mixed in there. So you
hmm
kind of just have to take it, even though it's very hard in the moment to remember that like this moment is gonna pass. But it does make you so grateful. Like now when I go to the doctor and I'm healthy and this baby's healthy, I'm like, thank God, because it so easily could have been a day like my sister had to,
hmm
or getting a call about a job that's great, or getting in a great appointment for an audition. Like how lucky is that to happen now? Because 8 years ago I was at rock bottom calling my dad being like, how do I call the car company and my insurance, what do I do, like I have no money. It's you just you learn through
hmm
all that.
And I think we forget how capable we are. Like,
Totally.
we can figure things out, but for some reason, like when we're in the moment, I mean, not invalidating what we're going through, how we're feeling, but it's like humans are amazing. And like I like use like travel as an example because nothing ever goes your way when it comes to travel, no matter how prepared you are. But for the most part, like you'll figure it out. If your luggage is lost or you got dropped off in the wrong hotel or you don't know the language, like those are the moments when you tap into like a part of you that you didn't even know existed. And you're like, oh my God, like it's survival. You will figure it out.
Do
So,
you feel like that with motherhood? Like, because I'm so curious for myself to see like
mhm.
what happens. Like I'm already calling myself mom,
You are though. Yeah,
but like
expecting.
when your baby's here, like do you just kind of naturally you figure it out, or you lean on that
hmm
intuitive part of yourself that knows what you're doing, or are you just
hmm
constantly surprised by your own like unknown knowledge that you figure out?
Absolutely. Like I was terrified of bringing my son home from the hospital because like my partner and I joke around like we feel like we're teenage parents,
Yeah.
We're like we're not, we're 30s, but I'm like no, we're like 15. Like it's like the weirdest thing. But bringing my son home, I think we were both just freaking out kind of like, "Oh my God, like we just want him to like keep breathing." You know what I mean?
Yep. Just
So
make
it
it
was
through
like,
the night.
yeah, and like to be honest, it's such a blur now because I don't even know how we got through it. Obviously, we leaned on each other. And then when my partner left to work, that's when I freaked out because I was like, oh my God, it's just like the baby and I. Like, I have to make sure he's good. But like, yeah, you just are getting to know the baby. And like, there's a bond again that's just like nobody can ever, ever, ever like replace that. And you're growing the baby. So that bond has already started.
Yeah.
So it's like once they're born, like your scent, your voice, like your heartbeat, all of that, they're already familiar with that. And it's like a beautiful thing. But I
Yeah.
will say there were moments when I questioned what I was doing, and that's when I kind of would outsource my intuition. Like I remember there was a time when I asked like my mother-in-law, I don't even know, something basic about like the bottles or like, oh, should I do this or should I do that? And I feel like I already knew the answer, but because I was still not as confident in being a mom and in my decisions, I would keep asking. And it's not a regret, but like now it's funny because I just don't ask anything. I'm not saying I'm an
Yeah.
expert, but I feel like I know what's best for my baby. So like I have, certain rules of how I want to raise him. And I just stick with my guns now because at the end of the day, everybody's going to have advice and, you could take it or leave it. But I
Yeah.
do remember I was confident and trusting my intuition. But there were moments that creeped in where I was like, oh, is this right? Is this not? Like, let me ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's all part of the process of figuring motherhood out.
Right. Right. It's such a it's just a crazy to be we're coming to the end now. I'm in my third trimester of pregnancy, and I'm like, wow, this year is gonna shift and change me so much. And I'm so curious to like meet that version of me that just has like full faith in it. Because even now, I'm like, I'll pretend I know what I'm doing, but I'm still like, I don't know about that, but let's
Hmm.
roll. But I'm very excited for that mom intuition to really like guide me through the
Mm.
moments coming up that I'm sure are hard. Because like, I don't know, pregnancy for me has been so magical and so wonderful, that like even more than I knew it could be.
Hmm.
And so I just keep telling myself, like, it's going to get better. Like, it keeps getting better, doesn't it? Like, then the baby's going to be here.
Mm.
Like, there's this little person, and like, I get to see my husband become a dad, and I get to like learn this new version of me. And like, it's so exciting. And it's, I don't know, I feel like very happy to be a woman and to be a mom and all the things. I'm like, and
No,
so,
we're very powerful. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
very,
love your perspective because I think you are embracing the women in you and also not like you're not really scared of what's to come because trust me, there's going to be lots of changes and you hit it on the nail with the fact that your lifestyle will be different. Your priorities will change. Like we talked about this like off air, but like friendships will change, dynamics are changing. But again, it's an exciting time because you can, remove all the things that will no longer serve you in a couple of months. And you're
yeah,
going to make space for all the other beautiful things. And you honestly wouldn't even know what that is until you make space. Like that's the whole point,
yeah,
right? We can only take so much. And you have to be super cautious of like your energy. And whoever has access to that is like it's a beautiful thing. Like not
yeah,
everybody can have access to you and your
yeah,
time.
yeah. It is interesting too. Like, through pregnancy, I weirdly have had a lot of the women in my life who have kids have actually been quite negative about me.
Really?
Yeah, like in the jokey haha way of
Mm.
like, oh God, like your life is, oh, you'll never sleep. Oh, you're tired. Like it's literally
Uh,
the classic just wait things. And I keep saying to my husband, I'm like, man, I'm the first one in my friend group to be
hmm.
pregnant. Like I seem to be jumping off the ledge first. I'm like, I cannot wait for all of my girlfriends to be pregnant and for me to be the voice in their life to be like, you've got this. Like
Yeah.
it's hard. Like you're so capable of doing this, and to
Hmm.
be positive and to just tell them like, listen, I can tell you what was hard for me, but the things that are hard for you are not going to be the same. So
Exactly.
I can't give you advice on that. Like what I can tell you is you've got it. Like you have more capability in your life than you're even aware of. Which has been my experience while being pregnant, because there's been days that have been super hard. Um, and somehow like it's just not bad enough to not make it through. Like you just handle it.
Yeah, and it's so true. Like, first of all, everybody's journey again is different with pregnancy
Yeah.
and motherhood. But I heard the same thing too. Like, I traveled a lot before, and they were like, "Okay, well, say goodbye. Like, you're not gonna have time to travel." And it's like, that's why I think the message I sent you after we meeting was like, I'm so excited to,
Yeah.
like follow your journey and support it because like that's what we need. We don't need it to be scaring other expecting
Oh,
moms because
also,
it's not.
yeah, your life is different. Your priorities are different. Like if we have to travel, we'll figure it out. Like
Yeah.
just I don't know. I really thought it was a cliche, all the just wait things, because you hear about women doing that, and I'm like, no one actually does that. Oh, they do. They really, really love to say it.
Yeah. And it's like the weirdest thing because I feel like they feel because they've experienced it that's like the journey. Like,
Yeah,
like that's for everybody. And it's like
yeah.
just let them have their moment.
Yeah, like I'll let you know what's hard for me when we talk
Yeah,
about it comes up, and
exactly.
we'll compare our trauma then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are wrapping up, and my podcast is called The City Confessions. So I would love for you, Hannah, to share a confession with all of us. I feel like you kind of alluded, like you're not so pro New York mindset, but is there another confession whether it could be something like funny or silly, a fun fact, um,
Mm.
a something people would be surprised to hear about from you, or a misconception, or like
Oh my
Anything.
God, this is making me feel so boring.
No,
I'm like, what confession?
no, people are always
Um,
stumped with this question, so it's not you.
a confession. A confession. I don't know. I'm kind of in this space right now. I feel like I've talked a lot of shit on New York, especially to my poor husband. And now I'm kind of feeling like, okay, confession. Maybe I'm not quite ready to leave tomorrow from New
Mm-hmm.
York. That feels
Because you
boring.
were ready to pack your bags the day we
Oh yeah.
met.
Oh yeah. I'm like, I'll pack the kitchen up by noon, have it ready to go. But it's such a boring one. I wish I had like a saucy confession.
No, that's
Right? Like,
okay. It's kind of saying, yeah.
but confession is I'm very content, maybe more than I'd like to admit, in our little apartment, in our neighborhood, in our life right now. And so as much as I like love to, poke the bear with telling him like, let's get back to LA, I'm
Uh-huh.
also kind of like, okay, I'm happier than I'm letting you believe.
I love that. And who knows, the baby can change that. Either way, right? It can go,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. They could
So
get here and
just
be
see.
like, yeah, we're not going. Or I could be like, book the flight to
Yeah.
LA.
I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, at
Yeah.
the end of every episode, I do a fire round of New York City questions, and it'll be so interesting because again, you're not the one who like loves New York, but it'll be interesting to see your responses. So you can
Okay.
answer it with the first word that pops up in your head.
Okay.
Okay, so what's your favorite thing about New York?
Food.
What's your least favorite thing?
Smells.
Describe New York City in one word.
Vibrant.
And what's your go-to spot? Like cafe, restaurant?
Favorite restaurant is Pasquale Jones.
I actually haven't tried that. So let me
Oh
add
my
that
God.
to my list.
So let's go on a
Yes,
date
we
to
should.
it later.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, it's
Done.
so good. You'll love it.
Yes. And then the last question is if you can thank New York City for one thing, what would it be?
I can't. I feel like I owe New York. uh, It's truly been the best years of my life living here personally. I fell in love here. I have my baby here. Uh, New York will forever, as tough as it is for me being here, it only created the best memories I've ever known.
You see, now we're leaving on a good note, on a high.
Now we are. I see what you did.
Not my intention, but it just worked out perfectly. Well, I appreciate you, Hannah, talking to us about your background and opening up about just like your life. It's a beautiful thing for you to be vulnerable. And that's like why I started this podcast. I think it's interesting to see that we as humans have different layers to ourselves. And that's why it's beautiful to have like relationships. And I also believe that everything happens for a reason. And I'm so excited for you and happy that our lives have crossed paths. So
Me too. Thank
thank you
you for
so much
having me.
for being on. I will have all of Hannah's information in the show notes. So be sure to expand on that and follow her. And if you are a mom or expecting or just excited for like moms to be, you can follow her journey as well. All right. Thank you, Hannah. I'll talk to you all next week. Bye.